So what I prepared tonight were the 16 things I would tell you about 2016, none of which will indicate a preference on my part for or against any of the candidates. Because as Nate mentioned, I'm going to be back as a panelist on December 15th at the Venetian Hotel. I will be back as a panelist in March in Florida for CNN, and I hope to keep getting them to come. And I wouldn't blame them if they thought I was not fair. I wouldn't blame them if they didn't come on the show. So I'm always relentlessly fair. Point number one of my 16 points. You cannot do too much media if you're a Republican. Right, number one, you cannot do too much media. I talked about this today with Robert Costa, Washington Post reporter, after Donald Trump was on the show. And we laughed because you can get through to Donald Trump. Now, if I had tried that with any other candidate, I would never have gotten through to any other candidate. They are all layered with comms directors and press secretaries and strategists, and they overthink everything. This is a blanket criticism of every campaign except for Donald Trump. Donald Trump is paper thin between him and the media. And that's why he has done so well, is because he's been ubiquitous in talking to people. And ubiquity in the media matters a great deal. Point number two, you can't do much media if you're Hillary Clinton. You can't do too much if you're a Republican, you can't do much at all if you're Hillary. Why is that? She cannot put up with a sustained examination of her assumptions and her beliefs. And I'm not talking just about Benghazi. Now, everyone says in all of Twitter that she got through an 11-hour hearing. That's actually not an 11-hour hearing. It was like an 8-hour hearing. It's like you're saying I'd gone through an 11-hour hearing today. I have talked more today than Hillary Clinton talked in those 11-hour hearings. And they had a very limited inquiry that they had structured about the night of September 11th, 2012, and the events leading up to it, and the events of that night, and the events there following. And they got a lot of admissions against interest for the lawyers here. And they developed a lot of news stories, and I thought it was a terrible performance for her, though the media thought, oh, she didn't faint. Hooray, she didn't faint. It's not a big deal not to faint. It is a big deal not to lie, and it is a big deal to come up with answers and persuasive narratives, and she did not do that. The very next day, she went on Rachel Maddow, not a dangerous situation. And she said that the VA scandal was not that widespread. It's a fantastically wrong statement to make. It's a terrible scandal, resulted in the death of nearly 36 veterans, resulted in an inspector general and fraud investigation, the FBI investigation. It is widespread. Veterans, more than 120,000 veterans have not received the care that they deserved within a timely fashion within 90 days of their requesting it. It is a horrific scandal that reflects the inability of government to do large-scale things effectively like the private sector does. She can't answer that, so she made it up, and Rachel didn't call her on it. Did not say, no, you're wrong, but it's pretty widespread, Madam Secretary. And so she retreats and they retract. That's what she does. She retreats and she retracts, and then she runs away. We won't see her. She did an interview with Jake Tapper. It was a hard-hitting interview. She did not do very well. We will not see her for months in a setting with any moderately hostile audience. Third rule, nice is good in many people's eyes. Nice is a nice change, and this explains Dr. Carson. People who hate conflict. So, if you're conflict averse and you hate all the yelling and screaming, my wife does not listen to talk radio. Doesn't listen. She cannot stand it when we get to yelling. She turns it off. Conflict adverse. She said, I hear that at home. And I can turn you off when I'm in the car. I can't turn you off at home. So, quick, off you go. Some people don't like it. How many of you don't listen to talk radio? So there are a few of you here. Most of you are talk radio listeners, or you wouldn't be here. And so you have to like it. And some people don't like it. They want a nice guy. And sometimes nice guys finish first, as they did in Kentucky on Tuesday night. Matt Bevin is a member of the Board of Trustees of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He's a born-again, evangelical, nice guy with 9 kids, 3 of whom he adopted from Ethiopia. Do you think that some of his support came from people who said, I don't know much about politics, but that's a good guy. I'll let him run the state? That counts for a lot. Maybe 25%, maybe Ben Carson, because he does not know politics the way I know politics. He just doesn't, and not many people do. He doesn't know the numbers and the stuff like that, but I don't know pediatric neurosurgery. You can learn a lot of this stuff, but he sure is inspiring and he sure is nice, and that's good. Point number 4. Bold is good in many people's eyes. Finally, straight talk, not PC. Right from the heart. Ask me any question, I'll give you any answer, and I'll tell you about myself when I do so. Who is that? Trump. Now, who doesn't like to listen to Donald Trump? I want you to stand up if you don't like to listen to him. I'm addicted to Donald Trump. I am. If you put him on, I will watch him for as long as he goes, because he is a fantastically trained communicator. And I asked him the question that was on my mind today. Why didn't we get the name of this assailant? We didn't get the name of the assailant because it's Mohammed. And he said, that's bad. And you know what? When he said that, he connecting with me. He said, that's bad. The American people need to know this stuff. But what they don't need to know is we sent 50 Special Forces troops over. They got a target on their back. He's right. He's right. He's right. He's the only guy who will say it. President Obama's a dummy. You don't do this stuff. You don't announce that you send Special Forces to Syria. And you do announce names. And you don't rule out terrorism when you shouldn't rule out terrorism. And you don't pretend the Russians are our friends. And you don't pretend the Chinese are our friends. And you don't do deals with Iran. And okay, so Donald Trump stands up and he speaks the truth clearly, directly, and people love it. Number 5. Free is good in many people's eyes. Those are the Bernie Sanders people. Right? They think things are free. And as Paul Ryan said on my show on Monday, I was in D.C., and the new speaker came over, did his first radio show with me. And he said, you should wait until you see how expensive free is, quoting P.J. O'Rourke. And I got it, but I don't know if the audience got it. He said, that's a joke, by the way, because free is never free. Free is always expensive. So when you say to college kids, college will be free, it's not free. They're just spreading the cost somewhere else onto the increasingly small number of taxpayers or from a future generation from whom it is being borrowed improvidently. But free sounds great to a lot of people. And that's why Bernie Sanders is doing good. He's promising free stuff. That's his vote. Socialism is free stuff. Number 6, up from nothing is great in many people's eyes. How many of you started with nothing? Okay, people who know they had nothing know that they had nothing. My mother used to tell me, I had something. I had a great upper middle class family. I grew up in a great upper middle class life in the northeastern Ohio. My dad was a lawyer. My mom did not go to college because they couldn't afford 3 kids going to college. She was a nurse, and she grew up in the Depression. She said I had one dress in the Depression. So she had nothing. Her dad was a fireman, though. He had a job. So I've heard about close to nothing. And so they had something. People who have nothing and come from nothing, we admire that in America. It's deeply in our genes to admire that because it's all our story. Because everybody's story in here, if you go back, there's a generation which had nothing and made something. I don't care what generation it is, you haven't wasted it, but we all know back there. So we deeply admire Cruz and Rubio for that. That's why I think they're in 3rd and 4th right now. It's because we like nice, that's Ben Carson. We like bold, that's Donald Trump. Okay, why Cruz and Rubio? Because they came from nothing. And they're young, and they're smart. They're really, really smart. Number 7. Success as a woman in a hostile environment in the private sector is a big plus in many people's eyes. And that is why Carly has a base of support. She has a story which is unique. First female CEO of a Fortune 50 company. That's a big deal. Right? So that's a very big deal because I would get cut to pieces in the corporate world. I can't read a balance sheet. I can't. And I never took accounting, and I don't have an ATM. I don't. Family finances are run by the fetching Mrs. Hewitt. I know politics, and I read a lot, and that's my job. And so I couldn't run a Fortune 500 company, a Fortune 50 company. And the idea of being able to handle that many people effectively and to decide to buy, what did she buy, Compaq? Yeah, Compaq, okay? That's a breathtakingly big decision. She made it coolly, calmly. They threw her out because of it. She didn't cry. She didn't whine. She bounced right back, sits on a bunch of boards, went and served on the PIFIAB, the President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board. I know PIFIAB. I serve PIFIAB. I know the world of counterintelligence. She's really skilled. And so she has got a great natural audience. So she's got a level of support. Number 8, Keep my eye on the watch, don't worry. I'll get you out of here at 8:30, I promise. Old names, old brands are handicaps, not helps. And both Jeb and Hillary have these problems. When you hear Bush, you think of things. Whether or not they have anything to do with Jeb, I asked him this question at the debate. Said, Governor Bush, the biggest elephant in a room full of elephants is your last name. I thought that was elegantly stated. You promised me in a radio interview, I'm recalling this from memory, but it's pretty close, that you were your own man and you would neither be hindered nor obliged by your father's and your brother's decision. Yet you rolled out a foreign policy team that is almost 100% drawn from your father and your brother's administration. When does it stop? What's different? And he answered, but he got punched up pretty bad on that. And then he came back and he said, but my brother kept us safe, which was his best moment in the debate. Point number 9. Of our dozen or so Republicans, Ted Cruz is the only one who can run the board and be done by March 15th. All the others will have to be in a knife fight that will go on and on and on. Why is that? Well, right now it looks like Ben Carson wins Iowa. Okay, if Ben Carson wins Iowa, that Ted Cruz is not running the board. But if Ted Cruz sneaks up and the conservatives decide they want to put this thing to bed before March 15th, Cruz wins Iowa, Cruz comes in third in New Hampshire, Cruz wins South Carolina, which is profoundly conservative. Nobody cares what's happened in Nevada because it's Nevada. The SEC primary includes Texas, so Cruz wins Texas. Mike Huckabee blunts the Arkansas effect a little bit, but Ted Cruz wins Oklahoma, probably the most conservative state outside of Texas. And he rolls up delegates. He gets momentum. It's Cruz, and Cruz knows how to talk. So he's the only guy who can run the board. Nobody else can run the board. Everybody else is going to have a knife fight. Number 10, if, however, Cruz gets out and Carson fades, as a lot of the conventional wisdom comes up, what does that leave? At this point, Rubio-Cruz duel. How interesting is that? Right? A Rubio-Cruz duel. They're number 2, 3, and 4. So if Ben Carson fades after Iowa, and Trump gets out because he gets bored, then you have a Cruz-Rubio duel. They're the next two. And how interesting is that? They're both Tea Party conservatives. They're both lawyers. They're both eloquent as can be. You could have Lincoln Douglas-style debates with those two. You could just say, hey, guess what? No moderators. You guys go up there and talk. I'd watch that. I'd pay money to watch that. Right? That's better than Floyd Mayweather, that fight. I paid money for that. That was a terrible fight. I'd pay money to watch two great orators go at each other. 11. There's a conventional wisdom, there always is, tomorrow terrorism can change the race. It might have changed it tonight. Because if that had been a Delta or a United airline that had left Egypt and had been blown up, it would have already changed the presidential race. We're not as worried about Russians getting blown out of the sky. Now, it was an ISIS bomb. The Prime Minister of London has told us that. Our intelligence agencies have confirmed that. The President said it's possible. You don't encourage it. It was an ISIS bomb. So what's that mean? That means they have inside people. But mostly when I talked to Mike Pompeo about it yesterday, it means they have capacity. They have bomb-making skill with access to industrial capacity that they've never had before. And our people are worried. Mike Pompeo is worried. Tom Cotton is worried. The people I talk to are on the intel committees. They're very worried that their industrial capacity combined with their technical skill, combined with the people who are going to the jihad, they're not dummies. And so they're very sophisticated. So this race will change anytime, at any single moment. Number 11, it would change it. Number 12, it is going to change it. I don't think we get through a year without a major terrorist incident affecting American lives. I just don't think it's possible. There are too many jihadis. There are 50,000 jihadis. They're going, they're coming, they're going, they're coming. I do not know what this kid in Merced was motivated by. But I know that ISIS put out a tweet applauding him today. They did. This is all they want. They want to encourage lone wolf attacks with any weapon to take out the infidel. And so they applauded him. Is that going to happen in America in the next year? Yep. How many, I mean, the odds. Who wants to make that bet? I don't want to make that bet. I'd rather bet on the Browns. But I just think it will. And when that happens, what the lens through which we view this is going to change. Or if there's an incident with Russia, and there appears to be that Vladimir Putin is interested in having an incident, he's pushing the envelope every single day, so it is going to change. Point number 13. I have enough time. Paul Ryan is the best news in years for the GOP becoming Speaker. Just the absolute greatest news possible. And I felt that when he sat down in my studio in D.C., that he would come and do it. You know, with that one appearance, he appeared one more time than John Boehner did on my show with me in 5 years. One appearance. Now what? I'm not like the hardest guy to interview. Mark Levin, my buddy. If you're John Boehner, you don't go near Mark Levin. He'll tear your throat out. You don't want to go near Mark. Mark has been my friend since 1989. And so I love Mark. But if you're John Boehner, you don't want to go talk. If you're Mitch McConnell, you don't want to talk. But you talk to me. He never did. He didn't care. So in his first week, he reaches out, does all the Sunday shows, comes to my studio, sits down with me, and stays 2 segments. What's that mean? And he's great. He's got charisma. He's got no notes. He answers every question. He speaks in complete sentences. And he says, the purpose of the House is to frame the 2016 election. So he gets it. You can't pass any legislation with Obama in the White House. The president's going to veto it. We can't sustain a veto. We can't even get it through the Senate. So what do you do for the next year? You frame the election. You pass the laws that you will pass if you have a Republican president and you can get them to him. And you tell the American people, this is what we're going to do. He gets it. Best thing in the world. Number 14. This kind of goes back to number 2, but it's different. Hillary is a terrible candidate. Now, number 2, what I said was she was a terrible Secretary of State. That's different from what I'm saying now, is that she is a terrible candidate. You can't listen to her. The only setting in which she does well is when she can control her voice and slow it down and drop it lower and not get angry and not get excited and not have to raise her voice. Because the minute she begins to raise her voice, it gets really high, and it gets very annoying, and people hate it. It's true. Moreover, she starts to scream, almost inevitably. Now, that is because she can't hear herself. And I don't know why it is that the amplification is always wrong, but she starts to scream. And when you scream at people, it doesn't look good. And men can get away. This is not a sexist comment, it's a communications comment. Men can get away with being loud very, very easily. Women cannot get away with being loud. It does not communicate well over the small screen. She is also a terrible retail campaigner. Why don't you see her mixing it up with people? She doesn't like it. She's not good at it. She's not warm. As good as Bill was, she is that bad. So he would go into a room and he would suck it up and he would love that energy. She's not that way. Number 16, objectively, the thing that matters the most in picking a president is their national security commander-in-chief skills. It's the one thing that they do that no one else does. They don't pass the tax code. They can negotiate it. They don't decide how much money to spend. They can negotiate it. They don't set the prime rate. It's done over at the Fed. All they do is they run the world. They run the United States military, their commander-in-chief. So, number 16, the lens through which I view it is always, who do I want to be the commander-in-chief of the men and women in the armed services, and deploy them and decide when they will go in harm's way. I think we beat Hillary unless we nominate someone who fails that test objectively. Someone who gets onto a debate stage and cannot communicate effectively that they will be responsible stewards of the nuclear power. So our people should be out talking about national security every day. That's what they should be doing tutorials on. Every single day, they should be being briefed on the world so that they can tell the American people, you can trust me, not going to get us into a war, not going to start a nuclear fight, I will protect us, you'll be safe. So my 16 lessons come down to this, one lesson. We have no idea what's going to happen. None, zero, impossible to predict. That's why it's so much fun.